Okay, good evening everyone. We've had a couple of clear nights since the last meeting, but they're still in relatively short supply. Not much sunshine either today. We never got really much of a look at it. I don't know whether you got an observation or not, Peter, but this little compilation was sent by Peter yesterday, and you can see he's managed to capture a few spots. This is the picture of the sun this morning, just before I left the house. You can see there's a few smaller spots about to go off this side, and there's a fella just coming on right here. So still a lot of activity. Not as busy as it was a week or so ago when we had that massive sunspot 1429, and he caused quite a few eruptions on the sun and quite a few aurora, and some people were able to see it with the naked eye. This would be several times the size of our Earth. So a really it's an enormous sunspot. We had a huge number of aurora alerts, but we never actually saw, well, I never actually saw any auroras. The closest we seem to have come here, this is a photograph from Durness in Scotland, which I don't know Scotland well enough, but I'm assuming it's fairly far north.
It's as far north as you can get.
It's about as far north as you can get, apparently. So, you know, they were able to sort of look on to the auroral arc as it was, but it never quite pushed back far enough for us to get a really good look at it. Having said that, John Hall did manage to get a photograph of an aurora through clouds, or else it's a photograph of a naked green Hulk. But we almost got an aurora, and John, I think, did better than most of us. Yesterday was the first day of spring, and this was actually a photograph taken off the first day of spring, or the first seconds of spring. Here you can see spring was actually at 05:14 yesterday, and here it's 05:13:56, and there's the sun, and that was winter, and all of a sudden, bang, a few seconds later, we're into spring. So it is indeed spring, and today was very pleasant. But most of the interest over the last couple of weeks has been the dance of the planets over in the western part of the sky, or as we now refer to it as the massing of the planets. And this was a photograph I took from my father's house overlooking Bangor. You can see Jupiter at that time was the house planet in this shot, and then Venus, unmistakably brilliant, and down here, little Mercury. And actually, I sent this photograph to Paul, and he said to me, Andy, you can actually see a Uranus as well. So I couldn't see it with my naked eye, I have to be honest. It was lost in the light there. But there were actually 4 planets on view at that particular time. It's a very good time to see the planets at the moment, because the ecliptic, that's the imaginary line, it's the plane of the solar system, lies at this nice steep angle. And here you can see from my favourite location in Crawfordsburn, you've got Mercury and Venus and Jupiter again, and you can see them sort of land on the ecliptic. Now it's very good. I was out showing some people this, and I said, look, if you turn round a little bit, you can see Mars. And Mars is unmistakably bright as well. And if you keep on going round, and you follow the imaginary line of the ecliptic down, you'll actually come to Saturn as well. So you're able to see, on a decent night, you'll be able to see 4 of the planets at least. Lots of people have been busy, so I thought I would show some of the nice photographs. This is a picture by Bernie Brown, and she's got a nice pair of planets here over Belfast. And she was asking me if there was any way that we would see an aurora, and I said, not with this light, I'm afraid. No chance of seeing an aurora. And this is one by Peter. So even up in Belfast there, Peter Place, you can see the 2 planets. And they've been particularly stirring, I have to say, these planets. They really look, you know, very, very interesting, and they almost seem to be pointing down to something, who knows what. Anyway, another fabulous photograph by Paul, and this was taken from the Antrim Hills. The moon's out of the way at the moment, so it's lovely and dark. And at this time of year, because the ecliptic's at a very steep angle, it's a good opportunity to see something called the zodiacal light. And Paul was able to capture not just Jupiter and then Venus, and here's the little Pleiades, but the cone of the zodiacal light is this sort of misty patch that you can see there. And you can also see in this brilliant photograph, you can see the Milky Way and all sorts of things. So if you can get off to a really dark site over the next couple of days anyway, you stand a chance of seeing the zodiacal light. Go ahead. Now, another opportunity, same theme, it comes on 25th, I think that's Sunday evening, and you can see there's Jupiter, Venus, and Capricorn, because the moon's going to be quite close beside it. So a real good opportunity for the photographers out there to try and catch it. Now, I got notified of this. The first one I got actually was from Ronnie Fields, and this was part of the Olympic celebration. I had to say nothing about it, and somebody said, "What do you think of that?" It's pretty impressive. I just hope it's not there every night, but it won't be apparently. It's going to move on. And Ronnie actually sent me a lovely photograph with the two planets as well in it. But this is Scotland Tower with their laser light show at the weekend, and you can actually see here he's managed. And in fact, this isn't one of Ronnie's photographs. This is actually Barry Brannigan, but you can see there's something moving there, an artificial satellite of some description. Okay, now this image here is, it just struck me that the image we have on the news sheet, that Neil puts on the news sheet every week, is the image that you would see with the planisphere. Now, a lot of people, especially people who are new to go-to astronomy, go-to telescopes, they all say, look, you know, what's the best way of finding your way around? Well, even though you've got a go-to telescope, it's good to know the bright stars. And one of the best ways to learn the bright stars is using a planisphere. And you can see in this image, which is taken off the Society for Popular Astronomy's website, you can see they've identified all the bright stars. And at the moment, of course, you'll be familiar with Orion and his retinue, and as you'll see in a second, the Winter Triangle, as they seem to be calling this now. And here's Castor and Pollux and Gemini the Twins, and over here Mars and Leo. And we'll come back to those constellations in a moment. But the thing to remember when using a planisphere is that you have to hold it over your head to make it work right. Because you can see in this picture that east and west are reversed. So you have to hold it over your head. And if anybody isn't sure how to use a planisphere, it's one of the most useful things that you can learn if you're a beginner to astronomy. Come and have a yarn with us, and we'll show you how to use it. As I say, at the moment, the sky's still full of interesting objects. Here you can see we've identified the Winter Triangle as opposed to the Summer Triangle, Sirius, Betelgeuse and Procyon. And of course there's Leo over there. Leo, very distinctive, backwards question mark, and then a little triangular bit at the end to represent the hindquarters. This is a representation that you would get the star atlas of Leo, and there you can see again, you can see the reverse question mark. A couple of interesting stars. Regulus, a very bright white star, it's a very fine star, and particularly interesting at the moment because you can see the contrast between it and Mars. And Mars is just down here somewhere at the moment. Mars is obviously going to be on the ecliptic imaginary path of the sun and planets against the background sky. The other star, which is quite bright in Leo, is the Nebula. Again, a white star. It's about half the distance of Regulus, but again, a very nice star. But one of the finest stars in Leo is Algiba, which is one of the finest double stars in the sky, actually. A beautiful pair of orangey yellow. So even if you've got a small, tiny telescope, have a look at Algiba and you'll be impressed. Two beautiful stars, almost the same brightness, very nice indeed. But at the moment, the spring is all about galaxies. And over the last couple of nights, with the moon out of the way, it's been very useful to have a look at these galaxies. Now, there are groups of galaxies in Leo, and up beside Leo, you've got Virgo. Virgo's famous for its galaxies. But I thought the other night I would have a go at photographing some of the galaxies. So I took a photograph of M66 and M65, and there's a third little object galaxy in there as well, and you'll see it in a second. And I also took a photograph of the second cluster, M105 and M96, and also M95's in there too. And this is a photograph which Paul took, and we can see the backwards question mark coming down here to Regulus, and then the triangle here at the back, and here's Mars, and Mars is moving in this general direction. So I thought I would photograph those galaxies, and here's a photograph of the so-called triplet, and you can see this is M65, M66, and over here you've got NGC 3628, and those are easily visible at the moment if you get a nice dark night. Also close by is Mars, so I thought I would take a wee photograph of Mars, and you can see here, you're just about to see a little polar ice cap. Mars is very tiny in the telescope, and you can see some dark markings. But that's probably the best photograph of Mars, this opposition. Mars was in opposition on the third of Mars or thereabout, but it's still pretty good, especially if you get to it before before it crosses, culminates on the meridian. Also, I took some photographs of the other group, which was M95, M96 and M105, and I noticed that Mars was right in the field and it had swamped the image, very similar to this, so I filmed them. And then, of course, I went on to Space Weather the next day, which is a very good website, and there's a supernova at M95. But I hadn't managed to dump my photographs because Mars, this is Mars, and it completely swamped the area where the galaxies were. But here, this guy managed to capture this supernova. Now, it was probably a day after the supernova discovery. I can't remember what day I took the photograph on. It wasn't the day after the discovery, I'm sure. But because the photograph looked overexposed, I just dumped it. So there's a chance to see a reasonably bright supernova in Rio at the moment, in M95. I mentioned earlier on that if you hang around until about 10 o'clock, 10 or 11, you'll start to see a pair of stars rising in the east, what appear to be a pair of stars. One of them Saturn, and the other one is the star Spica in Virgo. And the easy way to find Spica is to follow the tail of the plough down until you come to a very bright star called Arcturus. So you arc down from the handle of the plough, and then you spike on down to Spica. And if you follow the curve on down towards the horizon, you'll come to Spica. Sometimes called Spica, by the way. Anyway, but over beside it, of great interest at the moment, is Saturn. So Saturn's back in the sky, and again, even with the small telescope, you'll see the rings. And this is a photograph taken not very long ago. The rings are opening much more than they were over the last while. Saturday, this is one of the things we like to do, is see how many of the moons you can see. There are quite a few moons that you can see with reasonable aperture, and you can see there's, I don't know, half a dozen or so there. So this is the way they look on Saturday, around about 11:30. Just to finish off, there is still a reasonably bright comet. Still fairly disappointing, but some of you may remember Comet Garrett from earlier in the year. As of the next while, it'll be pushing right up towards the plough, Terry's famous pointers, and very close actually to the orange mark pointer there over the next couple of days. So it's worth having a look for. Again, this is a photograph I took the other night, and you can see, still quite bright in comparison. You can sort of see it was actually taken as a public like this, and you can see the nice green glow around the Comet Garrett, especially for the beach. Okay, thanks very much.